ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामुच्चतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In this Friday Satsangh of Ramanacentre for Learning, we spend the first part meditating on Bhagavan's Upadesham as it has been given to many devotees and captured in the book called Ramanacentre, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950. This is a compilation of all the questions put to Bhagavan on the subject matter of Atma Vichara, self-enquiry, and Bhagavan's answer to it. This has been compiled by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji. And after meditating on this week's question and answer, we will have a 20 minutes self-enquiry practice. Following that, our president, Sarada Akka, would be talking about self-enquiry as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita. That again is a questions put by many devotees, Ganapati Muni's devotees to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan's answer to them, which has been compiled as Ramana Gita. And finally, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In this week's question and answer, let us look at the questions 81 to 83 as they are very much connected to each other. Devotee asks Bhagavan, but can there be happiness beyond the grasp of intellect? Bhagavan says, the intellect makes you see things outside and not which is its own source. This has been highlighted and utilized by A.R. Natarajan Mama so as to make it very clear to all of us the limitation of the intellect. I read Bhagavan's answer once again. The intellect makes you see things outside and not that which is in its own source, which is its own source. Further, the devotee asks, may I repeat the question? Bhagavan is not as satisfied with the answer given to Bhagavan by Bhagavan. His question was, is not intellect required to grasp the happiness? Or if happiness is beyond intellect, how can anybody grasp that there is happiness? And to which Bhagavan is saying, the intellect makes you see things outside and not that which is its own source. So the devotee is not satisfied and he asks the question again. May I repeat the question? To which Bhagavan answers, the intellect is useful thus far. It helps you to enquire yourself, but no further. The source of the ego must be sought. If that can be done, the ego disappears. Remain as that source, and then the ego does not arise. The intellect, I repeat Bhagavan's answer, the intellect is useful thus far. It helps you to enquire yourself, but no further. The source of the ego must be sought. If that be done, the ego disappears. Remain as that source, and then the ego does not arise. Then the devotee asks, there is no happiness in that state. Maharshi says, there is no happiness, is only a thought. The self is pure, the self is bliss, pure and simple. You are the self. You cannot but be bliss. Being so, you cannot say here that there is no happiness. That which says so cannot be the self. It is the non-self and must be got rid of in order to realize the bliss of the self. I repeat Bhagavan's answer once again. There is no happiness, is only a thought. The self is bliss, pure and simple. You are the self. So you cannot but be bliss. Being so, you cannot say here that there is no happiness. That which says so cannot be the self. It is the non-self and must be got rid of in order to realize the bliss of the self. This area is all connected with intellect, which is the predominant thing that we are all relying in this century. All our assets, we believe, is as an intellectual property. There are many things being done to protect the intellectual property. There is a big race in the humankind to have this intellectual being first kind of an approach taken in the human evolution. But this intellect is only capable of dealing with objects which are outside of it. It can connect A to B and try to make a C or a D and try to bring new values. But Bhagavan is saying it has not much role to play in its own source, except that it can ask, who am I? And turn from rather looking at outside and trying to connect objects for values, to turn inside and see to whom is this value? Who is this going to be benefited? We may see that I am trying to do this value for the society and everything, but eventually, who is the one who wants to do it for the society? So this intellect, if at all, Bhagavan is very beautifully clarifying here, it largely deals with the outside object and tries to bring only outside effort, but only thing which it can do, turning inward, is to look for the source. Look for the source. That is the only thing internally that the intellect can do. And it cannot do anything beyond. It can put that question and start diving inward. And it is because the truth transcends the intellect. The truth is the source transcends the intellect. So by turning the attention to the source, the intellect also has to be dropped. The source alone has to be seen. And the source alone of the ego, who is very proud of his own intellect, the source of the ego has to be found. Because whenever I have an egoistic notion, I know that I am acting little egoistic. So who knows it? Therefore, the ego is also an object to something. Therefore, this intellect can do only that far, saying, who is that who is now aware that I am acting egoistically? Who is it? So it can do that questioning, and that is the only thing the intellect can do. Bhagavan is beautifully answering it. And if if it finds the source of the ego, then along with the ego, even the intellect will disappear. Then source alone remains, says Bhagavan in the first two question answer. And then the person who is asking this question about the intellect says, if I don't know through intellect that something is happy or unhappy, how will I know that state? That state where even the ego and even the intellect is only an object. In that state, how will I know that I am in happiness? And Bhagavan is trying to say here that is not an intellectual knowing of happiness or unhappiness. Because in the intellectual knowing, both these possibilities are there. I can say something is happy, and I can also claim something is making me unhappy. Whereas when we try to find the source of the ego, Bhagavan is saying what we will touch is our own self, which is bliss, which is unalloyed bliss, where there is no anya, there is no other. Therefore, it will be a continuous experience of peace, an experience of that pureness where there is no such divide as happy and unhappy, there is no such divide as subject and object, there is no such divide as one perceiving and the perceived object. All divisions which are which rise with the rising of the ego, rising of the individuality as this body moment, that division also being gone, what we see is pure bliss, pure oneness. And it is very simple, says Bhagavan. There is no intellectual circus that one needs to do there, because you are experiencing the pure bliss, and therefore there is no second one required to authenticate that there is this pure bliss. So Bhagavan is answering that in that state, when you transcend, that is when you reach the source of the ego, then Bhagavan is very beautifully saying there is no need for anybody to authenticate, because that state is pure bliss. We will continuously experience happiness. So, however, the one who claims that this is happy and not happy, the ego and the intellect, that cannot be said as self. That is a non-self. That is only an imaginary division. Whereas this real self, which is the source of the ego, source of the intellect, where there is no division, there all is God rid. What one experiences is continuous bliss. That is the teaching, that is what Bhagavan is bringing us to us. Rather than where the intellectual, we started off with this intellectual property approach by all of us. We are trying to hold on to intellect to gain happiness. Whereas Bhagavan is saying that you are already happiness. So instead of Nandakumarji used to very beautifully put it. Instead of working for happiness, work from happiness. Having recognized that your state is of bliss, our state is of bliss, and having fixed ourselves in that non division truth, then we can indulge in all of this worldly activity. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say, having applied the oil of the God, if you try to remove the jackfruit, if you try to open the jackfruit and separate everything, then the stickiness of the jackfruit would not be to one's hand. So then one can truly enjoy the sweetness of the jackfruit. But if one doesn't apply the oil, one is still holding on to the ego, which is dry, and we try to open up the jackfruit. Now, the gum of the jackfruit would all stick to the hand, and we will not be able to enjoy even the opening of the fruit, nor the actual enjoyment of the fruit inside the jackfruit. So, it is very, very important for us to consciously recognize this, that we need to get back to our self, which is pure bliss, and be established there consciously. And then, if it is required, we can indulge in the world. That is what Bhagavan says, and that to make us do this consciously, Bhagavan has given us Atma Vichara, where due to habit, whenever we move, our attention goes to thoughts, and we believe thought is important. He asks us to diligently inquire, to whom is this? Answer would be, it is my thought. Then he asks us to further inquire, who am I? And take the attention, use the intellect to turn the attention which was going outwards towards the thought back to the source of the I, source of the ego, and get back to that bliss. And by repeatedly getting back to that bliss, Bhagavan assures that the intellect, the ego gets absorbed, the mind gets absorbed in that source. And that, until that, we should diligently keep inquiring. The immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path for the next 20 minutes. No matter what thoughts we get, no matter whatever number of thoughts we get, whether it is good, bad, ugly, including spiritual, we should be clear that it is only an object to appearing to the subject I, and therefore we should diligently inquire, who am I, and turn the attention back to the source, because that is where the true happiness lies, not in the object, not in the perception of the object, not even in the subject who is perceiving all of this, but in the source of the subject, object, and the perception. There is one substratum, the self. To that alone, where there is no change, there lies the pure bliss, there lies the pure happiness. So we should diligently turn our attention back to the source. The immense grace of Bhagavan, for the next 20 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara. Shri Ramanaya Namo Raman. Over to Shara.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, in this part of the Satsang, we are meditating on the verses of Ramana Gita, teachings of Bhagavan as encapsulated in the verses of Ramana Gita. And we are now on the chapter Granthi Vedha, or cutting of the knot, which is chapter 9. Here, Bhagavan has told us that what is this Granthi? The Granthi or the knot is the I am the body idea. It is the link between the consciousness and the body. That link is the I am the body idea. He calls it the link, as we have seen in Ulladu Narpadu also. So here he told us that we can infer the existence of a space or a place of consciousness within us, because in deep sleep we don't know anything about the body, but the consciousness returns when we awake. So it must be returning to some source within, and he says that this is described by the sages as the heart. Sthalam tadeva hridayam suraya samprachakshate. That is what we had seen last week. Then Bhagavan continues. Nadi shakti vilasena chaitanyam shugatirmata dehasya shaktaya sarvah prithang nadi rupashritaha. In the chapter 5 on the signs of the heart, Bhagavan had told us already that the consciousness resides when in the body. It takes its locale in the spiritual heart, and from the heart it moves to the Sahasrara, or the mind center, or the brain center, and from Sahasrara it pervades the entire body, making us feel that we are the body, making us see a world apart from us, and getting entangled in the body idea and the world idea. Samsari manujo bhavet was what he had said in chapter 5. Here, Bhagavan is explaining how the consciousness, that energy, spreads through the body from the Sahasrara. He says it is because of the play of the energy in the channels. Nadi Shakti Vilasena Chaitanyam Shugatirmata. That the consciousness, through the energy of the channels, it moves through the entire body. Dehasya Shaktaya Sarvaha. The entire body becomes permeated by consciousness. Prithang Nadi Rupashritaha. By the consciousness moving through different channels. Then he goes on to say, Chaitanyam tu prithang nadyam tam shushumnam prachakshate atmanadim vadantyeke paretvamritanadikam. He says that the self moves through the consciousness is primarily moving through the Sushumna Nadi, which is also called the Atma Nadi or the Amrita Nadi. These are the names. But what happens is, he says, Sarvam Deham Prakashena Vyapto Jivo Bhimanavan. This is what is a result The technical part is that the consciousness is moving throughout our body. Actually, when one part of our body becomes numb or it becomes, we do not feel any sensation. At that time, the consciousness is not there in that part of the body. They are not aware of that part of the body. But normally, the consciousness is pervading, and therefore, we are aware of the body. One insight for us through this is that the body is jada. Again, the verses are indicating to us, but for the flow of consciousness to the body and to any part of the body is absolutely insentient. It is jada. This is reiterated by these verses to us. And further, the other aspect is also pointed out to us. Sarvam deham prakashena vyapto. Because of the permeation of consciousness through the entire body, jivo bhimanavan. Because of that, I am a jiva. Jiva abhimana comes in as I am a jiva. Manyate deham atmanam. I think that I am the body. Manyate, one thinks. Deham atmanam, this body is I. Plus, tena bhinnam cha vishtapam. And that the world is apart from us. So, this idea is reiterated by Bhagavan over here. If we do not have the I am the body idea, where is ignorance? If one does not mistake the body to be I, where is ignorance? There would be no ignorance. But why does one mistake the body to be the I? It is only because consciousness is pervading the body. The example is given, and it was given in the earlier chapter also, of a heated iron ball. When the iron ball is heated, it looks red, and it will also be hot. If one touches it, one can get burnt. But does iron have the property of fire in itself? It does not have the property of fire. So, similarly, here the body is jada. Do not mistake it to be Chaitanya. Do not take it to be the I. Just because consciousness is pervading it, understand that the consciousness alone is the truth, is the indication of this verse. And once you see the body to be the I, you also see a world apart from you. So pull back, pull back. So Bhagavan says, when one begins the inquiry, abhimanam parityajya dehe chatmadhiyam sudhihi. When one sets aside one's attachment, when one is no longer attached, when one becomes detached, of what use are all these experiences? In the first half of today's satsang, in the question answer, the attachment to the intellect was brought out. See, the attachment manifests in us in three ways primarily. One is attachment directly to the body, the physical experiences, the pleasures and the pains that we undergo with reference to the body, and the sense of doership. Because I'm a body, I think I can act also. There's a sense of doership. And I'm acting, I do this. But actually, what am I, even I'm moving this hand, I am not moving this hand. It is on account of the consciousness that pervades this hand that I am able to move it. I am able to move my fingers because of the consciousness that pervades them. I am able to use my voice because of the consciousness that pervades it. Pervades my throat, pervades my mouth, the tongue, everything is pervaded by consciousness, which enables it to function. So when I drop the attachment, recognizing that this is not mine, it is not my doing, nothing is my doing, it is only because of the consciousness that this is happening. Similarly, what about the thoughts which we have? We have attachment not only to the body, we have attachment to our thoughts, to our emotions. We say that, oh, I am feeling angry now, I am feeling sad now, I am feeling happy now. How am I aware of all this? Firstly, because consciousness has pervaded the body. I have decided body is I. Then all the experiences that arise within the body, I say they are mine, they are mine, they are mine. But what is this mind? What are these thoughts? Are they their own source of consciousness? They are not. They are also jada. Pranadhitamaha tat jadam hi asat. Bhagavan has told us in Upadesha Saram. The dhi is also jada. Vigraha, not only is the body jada, not only is the prana jada, even the dhi, which is the mind or the buddhi, both combined, they are also jada. The mind is jada. Thought is, what is thought? What is thought actually? Thought is only the awareness of an object. When the object does not exist except because of my awareness of it, then how is the object having any life of its own? It does not have any life of its own. Then, when the object has no life of its own, what is there in thought? If object is jada, what is left in the thought? What is a thought? A thought is my awareness of some object. So, if the object part is jada, what is left? My awareness, or I am left. Who is that I? If I take myself to be Sharada, then I am saying, assuming I am a body. But we have already said body is jada. So, the entire thought is absolutely insentient. It does not have any consciousness of its own. So, why be attached to it? What can it do for us? What is it giving to us? That which is dead, can it give us anything? Can the dead body gift us anything? Can the dead thoughts gift us anything? Do they have any power whatsoever? They do not have. When we understand and feel a sense of detachment, abhimanam parityajya, and we then get firmly, more and more firmly rooted in the conviction that the body is not I. Dehe cha atmadhiyam sudhihi. Setting apart the thought that body is I, vicharayeche rekagro. When one completely with one pointedness keeps on inquiring, who am I? Setting aside the thought that one is the body, setting aside that all attachment to anything, because when one is not the body, of what use is anything that is related to the body? Of what use is anything at all? Any concept, any idea, any experience, of what use is it when one is not this body? So thinking, when one inquires, who am I, continuously with one pointedness, Nadi nam mathanam bhavet, says Bhagavan. The churning of the nadis begins. So this is actually symbolically presented to us as the Amrita Manthana. The Amrita Manthana. Because, see, Bhagavan says the Amrita Nadi, the self is in the Amrita Nadi. So when inquiry starts, the churning of all the nadis start to be able to experience or get back to the Amrita. When Bhagavan says the churning of the nadi starts, so then churning means always many things are thrown up. That is what is also symbolically given to us in the story of Amrita Manthana. Many things come, good things come. When we begin the inquiry, many good things will come. The elephant Airavata came, the Kalpataru came, Mahalakshmi came, everything came. All good auspiciousness came. Okay, but what happened? Hala also came. The churning, good and bad also come up. One can see sometimes in the process of self-inquiry, one may be able to see a lot of the hidden darkness within us. One may sometimes wonder, was I better off before I did self-inquiry? Was I a good person then? I seem to be a good person then. Now I am aware of my anger. I am aware of my failings. I am aware of all my littleness. Have I really become worse? It is not the case. That which was hidden within us, all that comes to the surface in order to enable us to deal with it through self-inquiry. So long as it is hidden, how will we deal with it? We can't deal with it. The moment it reveals itself, we can deal with it through self-inquiry. So what happens? The mathanam happens. Then nadinam mathanenaiva nadinam mathanenaivam atma tabhyah pratak kritah kevalam amritam nadim ashritya prajwalishyati. So when such churning through self-inquiry keeps on taking ekagru incessantly with one pointed mind, without going back to attachment to the body, without going back to any other attachment, when one repeatedly, like I said in Appalam song by Bhagavan, Santatam Shalipara Santoshamahave, when one keeps on at the self-inquiry, what happens is the self gets separated, he says. Atma tabhyah pratak kritah. It gets separated, or it gets like the butter gets separated from the buttermilk. A very beautiful description by Purandaradasa in Bhagyada Lakshmi Bharamma. Like Majjigayolagina Benne Bhagyada Lakshmi Bharamma, he says. Like the butter in the buttermilk. You appear, you come out, you start floating. So the Atma gets separated from all that it is mixed up with. Now it's mixed up with the body idea, it's mixed up with every object in the thought, it's mixed up with emotions, it's mixed up with the intellect. It is so mixed up with everything. It becomes separate and clear. It becomes clear to us and it begins to shine, says Bhagavan over here. Kevalam amritam nadi mashritya prajwalishyati. It shines forth. The self shines forth, says Bhagavan, and he has given us the simple, his own special, authoritative, stamp-bearing method of self-inquiry. Do the inquiry, holding on to your sense of detachment. Do the inquiry, holding on to the recognition that the body is not I, because that gives the strength to the inquiry. He already told us in chapter 7 that for one with waning attachments and for one who recognizes that the body is not the I, self-inquiry becomes a true boon. Not that self-inquiry doesn't help otherwise. Self-inquiry itself leads us to that state of detachment as well. But once we are able to get that detachment, which is described again in the Appalam song by Bhagavan as Uparadi, Uparadiyahum Avuppodu Ulla Nalvasanayam Perungayam Serthu. So that uppu, adding that uppu is detachment. he says, or non-attachment. We, with his grace, the attachment to objects rising as thoughts begins to wane, and we are able to drop the thoughts through the question, for whom is this thought? And once the thought is dropped, we are also able to question, who am I? What is the I? And get back to the source where wherein the self is shining, resplendent. And then Bhagavan has explained in Ekanma Panchakam, once one gets back to self, one recognizes what he told us in chapter 5, the entire universe is contained in the heart. It is not like there is one nadi, there are many nadis, nothing. This entire universe is contained there. But during this process, it is important for us to segregate the self from the non-self, says Bhagavan in this Upadesha of his, which happens by his grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिदाशे यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि